what happened, what could have happened to two young kids that just vanished in the night.
People from different parts of the world have claimed to see time travelers or visitors from other worlds. While most of these stories aren't verified and seem unlikely, a few have been confirmed to be true.
When you mention parallel universes, the eyes sort of roll up and you giggle and you say to yourself, this is just silly, this is nuts.
The Highway 167 incident, Louisiana, 1969 LC, and Charlie had just started a small business in Abbeville, Louisiana. That afternoon, on October 20th, 1969, around 1:30 p.m., they were driving north on Highway 167 toward Lafayette, which was about 15 miles away. The weather was perfect, and there was almost no traffic on the road. Both men were in good spirits as they discussed their new business venture and future plans for growth. As they drove along the empty stretch of highway, they noticed an old car ahead of them moving very slowly. At first, they didn't think much of it, assuming it was just another vehicle on the road. When they got closer, however, they could see it was different from anything they expected. The car was from the 1940s, with a distinctive rounded shape that stood out sharply against the modern highway. They knew this was genuine because the license plate on the back said 1940. The car's condition was remarkable. It was not a restored or rebuilt vehicle. Everything about it appeared to be authentically from that era. The paint, the metalwork, the overall construction, all looked original. There was no sign of it being a collector's item or a restoration project. It looked exactly as it would have looked nearly 30 years earlier when it was first made. As Elsie and Charlie pulled up beside the car to pass it, they saw who was driving. It was a woman wearing clothes from the 1940s, a dress, hat, and accessories that all looked real and authentic. Not a costume, not a theatrical outfit. Real clothing from that period, including the correct style of hat and jewelry that were common in the 1940s. There was a small child sitting next to her, dressed in old-fashioned clothes too. The child wore period-appropriate clothing as well, complete with shoes and accessories from the same era. When the woman noticed the two men, her face showed fear and panic. She looked genuinely scared and upset. Her expression was not one of someone playing a part or joking around. It was real terror. Elsie called out to her through his window and asked if she needed help. She said, "Yes," and her voice sounded desperate. He waved for her to pull over to the side of the road. Both cars pulled over and stopped on the shoulder of the highway. Elsie got out and walked toward where the woman's car should have been. But when he turned around to look, the car was completely gone. It had vanished. There was no car. There was no dust. There was no sound of an engine. There was no sign of it going anywhere. The road at that spot is straight and open, with nothing on either side where a car could hide. The highway extended for miles in both directions with clear visibility. A vehicle could not have simply driven away without being seen. Elsie stood there in shock, trying to understand what he was looking at. Charlie got out of their car to see for himself. Both men searched the area, looking for any sign of the old vehicle. There was nothing. The woman and child had disappeared completely. Just then, another car pulled over. It was the car that had been driving behind Elsie and Charlie the whole time. The driver ran over to Elsie, his face showing confusion and concern. He asked where the old car went. He wanted to know what happened to it. He seemed just as confused as Elsie and Charlie were. This third driver had seen everything too. He described the same old car, the same 1940 license plate, the woman in old clothes, and the child. The incident remains one of the most puzzling encounters in Louisiana history. The Betty Andreasson Case, Massachusetts, 1968. In 1968, 1 year before the Highway 167 incident, a woman named Betty Andreasen from Massachusetts reported that she had an extraordinary encounter in her home. Andreasen was a housewife and mother who lived a normal, quiet life. She had no previous history of making false claims or seeking attention from the public. One evening, Andreasen reported that she encountered beings in her home that were not human. She described them as strange creatures with unusual physical features. She stated that these beings took her aboard some kind of craft or vehicle. The experience was frightening and confusing to her. She could not explain what was happening or what these beings wanted from her. When she returned from the encounter, Andreasen realized something strange. She believed that several hours had passed during her experience. However, when she checked the clocks and spoke to her family, she discovered that only a few minutes had actually passed. Hours had seemed to pass in what was actually just a short period of time. This was very disturbing and confusing to her. Years later, Andreasen agreed to be interviewed by a paranormal researcher named Raymond Fowler. During these interviews, she was placed under hypnosis to help her remember details from the encounter. Under hypnosis, Andreasen described seeing future cities and landscapes that were different from anything she recognized. She described advanced technology and people living in ways that seemed impossible for the time period of 1968. Fowler was a respected researcher who had investigated many paranormal cases. He examined Andreasen's story carefully and found no evidence of deception. He believed that she was telling the truth about what she had experienced, even though the story seemed impossible. Fowler documented the case thoroughly, recording all of Andreasen's statements and the details she described under hypnosis. Andreasen's case became one of the most detailed time displacement accounts on record. It was documented in multiple paranormal research archives and was studied by researchers around the world. The case attracted significant attention from people interested in unexplained phenomena and possible encounters with beings from other times or dimensions. Andreasen continued to stand by her story for over 50 years. She gave interviews about the experience and never changed her account of what happened. Even when people were skeptical or dismissive of her claims, she maintained that what she experienced was real. She lived a relatively quiet life after the incident, but she remained available to researchers who wanted to study her case. Betty Andreasen passed away in 2017, but her case remains one of the most well-documented accounts of a possible time displacement or encounter with beings from another time period. The case has never been fully explained, and it continues to be studied by researchers interested in unexplained phenomena. The Sergei Panamarenko case, Ukraine, 2006, number 3. In 2006, nearly 50 years after the Betty Andreasen incident in Massachusetts, a remarkable case emerged in Kiev, Ukraine. Police were called to investigate a confused young man wandering the streets. When officers arrived, they found a person who appeared scared and disoriented, dressed in clothing that looked very old and out of place. He had no understanding of where he was or what year it was. When asked for identification, the man provided official documents. The first striking detail was his ID card issued by the Soviet Union, remarkable because the Soviet Union had dissolved almost 20 years earlier in 1991. The man appeared to be in his 20s, but his ID stated he was born in 1932. He should have been over 70 years old, yet his appearance matched the photograph on the document perfectly. When police asked what date he believed it to be, he answered, April 23, 1958. Realizing they were dealing with something unusual, officers took him to a local mental hospital. The man was identified as Sergei Panamarenko and placed in the care of Dr. Pablo Puchkov, a physician with an open mind toward unusual cases. Rather than dismissing Sergei's claims, Dr. Puchkov listened carefully and investigated thoroughly. Sergei explained that he had wanted to take a walk one day with his camera when he observed a strange bell-shaped object in the sky, moving in an unusual way. He took photographs of it, and then suddenly found himself in 2006. Dr. Puchkov asked if Sergei still had the camera. When provided, the doctor immediately recognized it as a rare Yima Flex camera, a valuable old model that used film last manufactured in the 1970s. Dr. Puchkov contacted photography expert Vadim Poizner to examine the film. Poizner determined it had been manufactured in 1956 and, despite being over 50 years old, was in perfect condition. When carefully developed, the photographs revealed something extraordinary. They showed scenes of Kiev as it existed in the 1950s, with period-accurate automobiles, clothing, street signs, and buildings that no longer existed in 2006. Most remarkably, in several photographs was Sergei himself, looking exactly as he appeared in 2006, standing in 1950s Kiev streets with a young woman. They were dressed in era-appropriate clothing and appeared to be enjoying a pleasant day. The final photograph showed the bell-shaped object in the sky, exactly as Sergei had described it. When Dr. Puchkov showed these photographs to Sergei and asked about the object, Sergei confirmed his account. Immediately after taking the photograph, he said, "Something extraordinary occurred." He was transported to 2006. He expressed confusion and fear about what had happened. Dr. Puchkov, being a man of science, developed a hypothesis. If the object was a spacecraft from an advanced civilization capable of traveling at light speed, then, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, time dilation would occur. While nearly no time would pass for Sergei aboard the craft, 47 years would pass on Earth, providing one possible explanation. That night, Sergei returned to his locked hospital room. Security cameras captured him entering, but never recorded him leaving. The room had only one entrance and exit, both constantly monitored, with barred windows that couldn't be opened. There was no logical way for him to leave undetected. Yet by morning, Sergei had vanished without a trace. Police launched an investigation and discovered records of a man named Sergei Panamarenko, reported missing in Kiev in 1960, just 2 years after the date he claimed to come from. Investigators found the young woman from the photographs. Now in her 70s, she recognized them immediately and confirmed that Sergei had been her boyfriend in 1958. She stated he disappeared on the day the photographs were taken, but returned after only a few days, confused and disoriented. After this reunion, he disappeared again in the 1970s and was never found. Years later, decades after Sergei's second disappearance, the woman received a package in the mail. Inside was a photograph showing an older man with a mustache. The background showed Kiev, but it appeared very different. The skyline filled with tall skyscrapers and advanced buildings that didn't exist in any known era. The photo was dated 2050. On the back was a handwritten note from Sergei. He wrote that he was fine and would return soon. However, Sergei never did return. The photograph and note remained the only evidence of his continued existence after his disappearance in the 1970s. The Private William Cowan Account. England, 1951. In 1951, in a small English village near the Pennines Mountains, a British soldier named Private William Cowan reported something unusual during a routine military patrol. While on a standard patrol mission, Cowan met a group of soldiers wearing uniforms that seemed very strange and old-fashioned. He immediately realized they were wearing uniforms from the English Civil War, dated to around 1645. The uniforms were completely different from any modern military gear. They included old-style armor, weapons, and equipment that had not been used for over 300 years. At first, Cowan thought this might be some kind of historical reenactment or theatrical performance. He approached the uniformed men to ask them about themselves and to request directions back to his base. As he got closer and tried to communicate with them, the soldiers began to disappear. Within moments, all of them had vanished completely, leaving no trace of their presence. Cowan was deeply shaken by the experience. He immediately returned to his base and filed an official report with his commanding officers, documenting everything he had seen. The military took his statement seriously and recorded it in their official files. The report was documented and archived, though no formal investigation was launched into the matter. Military records show that Cowan's report was filed and preserved in British military archives. The incident was never explained, and no follow-up investigation was ever conducted. The military had no explanation for what Cowan had experienced. Some officers suggested that Cowan had been confused or mistaken, but his official record indicated that he remained calm and coherent when describing the event. Cowan maintained his account was truthful throughout his entire life. He never changed his story or admitted to making anything up. He lived a quiet life after his military service ended, and he continued to stand by his story until his death in 1992. Even late in his life, when interviewed about the incident, Cowan insisted that what he had experienced was real and unexplainable. He never expressed any doubt about what he had witnessed. The Moberly-Jourdain Incident, France, 1901, one of the most famous and well-documented cases of possible time displacement, occurred in France in 1901. Two educated British women named Eleanor Jourdain and Charlotte Moberly reported an extraordinary experience while visiting the Palace of Versailles near Paris. Both women were intelligent, educated, and came from respectable backgrounds. Jourdain was a teacher and scholar, and Moberly was the daughter of a bishop. Neither woman had any reason to fabricate stories for attention. On August 10, 1901, the two women were visiting the gardens at Versailles. They became lost while trying to find a specific location within the palace grounds. As they wandered through the gardens, they began to notice that things looked different from what they expected. The scenery, the landscaping, and the general appearance of the area seemed to belong to an earlier time period. The women described seeing people dressed in clothes from the late 1700s. They saw men and women wearing elaborate period costumes, and some of the people were riding horses. The landscape itself seemed different. Trees and pathways appeared to be arranged differently than they were in 1901. It was as if they had somehow stepped back in time to the era of Marie Antoinette, the French queen who lived during the late 1700s. One particularly striking encounter was with a woman the two British visitors believed to be Marie Antoinette herself. The woman was dressed in period clothing and was sketching in a garden. When the woman noticed the two visitors, she seemed surprised by their presence. Moberly and Jourdain felt uncomfortable and decided to leave the area quickly. After leaving the palace, the two women discussed what they had experienced. They were convinced that they had encountered a vision of Versailles as it existed in an earlier time period. They decided to document their experience and publish an account of what happened. Their book, titled An Adventure, was published anonymously in 1911. The case became famous in paranormal research circles. Many researchers believed that Moberly and Jourdain had experienced a genuine encounter with the past. Others suggested that they might have been confused or mistaken about what they saw. Skeptics argued that they had simply seen a historical reenactment or costume party. However, detailed investigations into the case revealed no evidence of any reenactment or party taking place on that day. The researchers found no record of any theatrical production or costumed event at Versailles on August 10, 1901. The mystery of what Moberly and Jourdain experienced has never been fully explained. The case remains famous in paranormal literature and continues to be discussed by researchers interested in possible time displacement. Common elements and continuing mystery. Many of these cases involve moments when witnesses seem to step outside of normal time. In the Highway 167 incident, a car vanished on an open road. In the Moberly-Jourdain case, two women seemed to walk backward through time at Versailles. In the Betty Andreasson case, several hours seemed to pass in just a few minutes. In the USS Eldridge story, a ship supposedly traveled through space and possibly through time. In Private Cowan's account, soldiers from 3 centuries in the past appeared and then vanished. To this day, these 5 cases remain unexplained. Scientists and researchers have offered various theories, but no one has provided a definitive answer to what really happened. The cases continue to fascinate people interested in the mysteries of time, reality, and human experience. Whether these accounts represent actual encounters with time travelers, interdimensional beings, glimpses into parallel worlds, or something else entirely remains unknown. But they serve as a reminder that there are still mysteries in the world that we do not fully understand. The possibility that time might be more flexible and less fixed than we believe continues to challenge our understanding of reality.